Your existing phone, the one in your pocket right now, not a new one, can already connect directly to a satellite. No new hardware, no new carrier plan. SpaceX's IPO filing made it official. More than 10 million people use Starlink Mobile every month. That's the satellite phone service, not Starlink's home internet business. Carriers are calling it emergency backup. SpaceX is calling it the death of the dead zone. So who is right? And what does it actually mean for your monthly phone bill? Dead zones. Everybody knows them. The stretch of interstate where navigation just freezes. The mountain cabin where you cannot reach your family. The rural job site where your crew goes dark for hours at a time. This is not a niche problem. T-Mobile's own data puts the coverage gap at around 500,000 square miles of U.S. landmass with no terrestrial cell signal, nearly the size of 2 Texases, and that's just one carrier's count. Tens of millions of Americans live, work, and drive through areas where the bar simply drops to zero. You are spending around $250 a month on internet connectivity and your phone plan combined. That is roughly $3,000 a year. For that $3,000, you still get the spinning circle, the no service bar, and the dropped call at exactly the wrong moment. SpaceX just raised $75 billion in the biggest IPO in history. And right there in the official filing, the legal document their lawyers had to be truthful about, Starlink Mobile is named as a direct challenger to traditional carriers. Not a backup product, a challenger with $75 billion in new capital behind it. The money is in the bank, the satellites are already in orbit, and the service is not coming, it is already here. The product is called Starlink Direct-to-Cell. The premise is exactly what it sounds like. Your normal phone with your existing SIM card talking directly to a satellite in orbit. No new device, no roof dish, no firmware update. The satellites use the same radio frequencies your phone already knows about. Standard LTE bands. Your phone cannot tell the difference between a cell tower on the ground and a Starlink satellite 340 miles overhead. It just sees a signal. Direct-to-Cell is already live in 22 countries, with more than 10 million monthly active users on Starlink Mobile. In the United States, T-Mobile is SpaceX's direct carrier partner. The service launched commercially under the name T-Satellite in July 2025. AT&T and Verizon customers can also access it through T-Mobile's network for $10 a month. So if you are on any of the 3 major U.S. carriers, the satellite network is already reachable. The service activates automatically when your phone cannot reach a ground tower. You do not switch it on. The network switches for you. Right now, the service handles texts and some basic location data, a message when you are deep in a dead zone, a check-in when you are off the grid. It is not replacing your full signal yet. But the reason this works on your existing phone at all, when every satellite service before it required a specialist handset, is in the engineering of how these satellites are actually built. And that engineering answer is what makes every major carrier on the planet nervous. Think of a traditional cell tower. It sits on the ground, covers a radius of roughly 10 miles, and your phone locks onto it the same way every time. Starlink's direct-to-cell satellites do exactly the same thing, except the tower is moving at about 17,000 miles per hour, 340 miles above your head. Each satellite carries a dedicated cellular antenna array broadcasting on the same mid-band LTE frequencies your phone uses. When your phone cannot find a ground tower, it searches for a signal. If a Starlink satellite is overhead, your phone locks onto it exactly the way it locks onto any cell tower, without knowing the difference. The satellites in the constellation are linked to each other by laser interlinks, high-speed optical connections between orbiting nodes. A text message does not need to drop down to the ground until it reaches a SpaceX gateway close to its destination. The whole network in orbit acts as one continuous relay. This is what older satellite services could never do. They used high-frequency bands your regular phone antenna was never designed for, which is why you needed a specialist handset the size of a brick. Starlink operates in mid-band LTE spectrum, the same frequency range your existing phone already has the radio hardware for. The current limitation is bandwidth. Each satellite covers a wide geographic footprint, and everyone inside that footprint shares. The same slice of capacity. Think of it like a single cell tower stretched over hundreds of miles of empty highway, fine for light traffic, not built for rush hour. That is why the current service is optimized for messaging. The shared capacity works, it just has a ceiling. That ceiling has a specific fix, and it is the reason SpaceX just spent $17 billion buying spectrum. Here is where the roadmap gets genuinely ambitious. In September 2025, SpaceX struck a $17 billion deal to acquire spectrum licenses from EchoStar, specifically the AWS-4 and H-block frequencies that cover the entire United States. SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell described the deal as the foundation for next-generation direct-to-cell satellites that will, in SpaceX's own words, expand the network's capacity by more than 100 times. That is not a typo. 100 times. Not 10% more, not double. 100 times the capacity per user per coverage area. These next-generation direct-to-cell satellites are designed to launch on Starship starting in 2027. Starship can carry roughly 60 of them in a single flight. More satellites deployed faster means the constellation fills out more quickly and more bandwidth becomes available per user in each footprint. The internal target, according to statements around the IPO filing, is service on par with a normal mobile network. Not just texts, voice calls, video, real data. And the ambition is not just rural dead zones. The target includes urban coverage, basements, tunnels, dense building blocks that even the best ground towers struggle to fully penetrate. If that plays out in 2027 and 2028, the satellite stops being backup. It becomes a real second option, and a real second option is something your carrier has never had to compete with before, which is exactly why AT&T and Verizon didn't sit still. Both carriers signed commercial deals with AST SpaceMobile, a rival satellite-to-phone company racing to build the same kind of network. T-Mobile bet on Starlink, AT&T and Verizon bet on someone else. Either way, every major carrier in the country is now racing to put a satellite between you and a dead zone. Before you start canceling plans, you need the honest version of what still has to go right. Here is where this actually stands. What is confirmed and working today? Direct-to-Cell sends and receives text messages on regular phones across 22 countries through carrier partnerships. More than 10 million people use Starlink Mobile every month. The physics are proven. That is the confirmed column. What is still a target? Broadband speeds, voice calls at real scale, and the kind of throughput that makes satellite a genuine alternative to your phone plan. That depends on three things: next-generation satellites launching on Starship on schedule in 2027, the EchoStar spectrum transfer clearing FCC approval without delays, and the network scaling to handle millions of simultaneous users without the shared capacity becoming a bottleneck. Any one of those three can slip. Starship's commercial launch cadence is the single biggest dependency. The whole roadmap, internet satellites, direct-to-cell upgrades, orbital data centers, all of it runs through that rocket, flying reliably and often. If the cadence falls behind, everything else slides. The service is not free in the way some coverage implies. T-Satellite is built into T-Mobile's higher-tier plans. AT&T and Verizon customers pay $10 a month to access it. What pricing looks like as it scales to broadband has not been publicly announced. And to be completely direct, you cannot cancel your carrier today. Current service fills gaps. It does not replace full coverage. The world where satellite is your primary signal is a 2027 to 2029 story at the earliest, and that timeline assumes Starship performs. Here is what the numbers look like if it does, and the piece of this story that almost no one in the mainstream coverage has connected yet. You are currently spending roughly $3,000 a year on connectivity. That number does not change because one company builds a better satellite. It changes because competition forces every carrier to respond. The moment satellite-backed broadband is a credible alternative, close enough that a real percentage of customers would consider switching, every major carrier has to defend its pricing. That is already starting to happen. AT&T and Verizon both signed on with AST Space Mobile, a competing satellite-to-phone provider, to build their own version of the same idea. When your competitors race to build a rival product instead of ignoring you, that is confirmation you are onto something real. You do not need to switch to Starlink to benefit from Starlink. The competitive pressure alone is what moves the incumbents. And there is one more thread in this story that nobody in the mainstream coverage is connecting, and it involves a phone that has not been officially announced yet. This is speculation, not a confirmed product, but the logic is clean. If SpaceX controls the satellite layer and Tesla were to build a phone designed from the ground up to prioritize Starlink connectivity over traditional carrier towers, that vertical integration is a genuinely new product, a device and an infrastructure purpose-built for each other. Apple did something similar when it built its own chips for its own software. It may never happen, but it fits the pattern of how both companies operate. And it is the thread worth watching as the direct-to-cell network matures. Vertical integration changes the hardware game completely, which leaves the one question that actually matters. When will these pieces actually start falling into place on the calendar? 2026, text and light data service expanding to more carriers and more countries. Watch for any voice call beta announcements. That signal's bandwidth is improving ahead of schedule. Early 2027, next-generation direct-to-cell satellites begin launching on Starship. The cadence over the first 6 months is your leading indicator. Watch for FCC approval of the EchoStar spectrum transfer, which clears the path to the 100 times capacity upgrade. Late 2027 into 2028. If regulatory approvals clear and the constellation builds out, this is when broadband speed satellite connectivity becomes something you can actually test, not just read about. The calendar gives us a strict checklist to watch, but if you want the absolute bottom line right now, it all boils down to 3 massive realities. 1. Starlink. Direct-to-cell is already real. More than 10 million people in 22 countries are using it today on their existing phones through existing carriers. The messaging layer is live and proven. 2. The broadband upgrade is a 2027 story. Next-generation satellites with more than 100 times the current capacity are on the Starship launch schedule, pending the EchoStar spectrum transfer clearing the FCC. Watch Starship's commercial cadence. That is your leading indicator. 3. You do not need to switch today. If the broadband target lands, the competition it creates drops your carrier bill even if you never change providers. The market forces are moving whether your current carrier likes it or not, which brings us straight to the one question this entire data drop sets up. If this gives you a clearer picture of what is actually working versus what is still on the whiteboard, subscribe to the channel. Every week we break down the biggest tech and money stories with real numbers and no filler. And our next video goes straight at the question this one just set up. Is there actually a path to killing your monthly phone bill entirely? We ran the math. The answer is closer than most people think. I will see you there.